As I was retiring from government and coming into the university, setting, and my interest initially, sort of was the efficacy of the policy work that we were working on in government. And there was this, which influences a lot of people's thinking, I think. And this is from Laliberte and Ripple's 2004 paper, which really showed kind of the huge loss of range for 17 large mammal species between historical times and current times. This area has got a variety of land uses, forestry, transportation corridors, agriculture, mining, human settlement, and particularly in the southern part of the area and the lower elevations. The scope of climate impacts was assessed by developing scenarios predicting ecological changes and impacts on wildlife habitat over the next century. Looking forward to 2080s, using one emission scenario, we see very substantive change. I was interested to see how this might drive, kind of some wildlife habitat range. This first example is caribou, and I'm not going to go into details to say how this is done, other than say that I took the random forest modeling that Dr. Roberts produced, and then reparameterized the Bayesian belief model that the caribou science team had produced. I actually went into the model and reran it. It's a very simple approach, really, and you start talking about modeling limits and all that kind of thing. That's a little bit scary, but it does, like that run did show a 25% loss. Wolverines, and for this, I based on a finding by Copeland et al. 2010 that wolverine distribution right across the polar or the circumpolar region of the globe is limited by late spring persistence of snowpack for denning, as well as August maximum temperatures. And similarly, that model shows a 37% loss in habitat. The current management approaches, which are rooted in the historic range of variability, will inevitably fail. The habitat conservation species management programs need to incorporate kind of new thinking, sort of that incorporates the climate change, perspective. So the third part of my study was, like to try and assess stakeholder support for conservation and adaptation. And my thinking around, doing this in the first place, came from, sort of a lot of experience. And I have a couple of past colleagues, Nancy Wilkin and John Reardon. This is kind of what we did. Stakeholders identified a number of constraints and opportunities to implementing conservation measures needed to address climate change. There's competing value-based interests. It's this conflict that drives a lot of the controversy, around habitat protection, but around things, surprising species management. Things like the cessation of processes which foster collaboration, like since government closed down strategic land use planning, ineffective implementation of the results-based policy framework, and the Auditor General's done a report, Forest Practices Board done reports, and the community just does not have confidence in governments. Most people aren't, if they believe climate change, they don't make the extension to ecosystems and wildlife. And there's an awful lot of inertia based on uncertainty. Well, what do we do? Your model could say this, your model could say that. We can't do anything. It wasn't all about constraints. People were full of ideas about the kind of the opportunities. People would like to see kind of broad and sustained efforts of building awareness and collaboration. And indeed, that's what PICS does. There's a need to revitalize government leadership and oversight. We need, as part of that, we need renewed support for science, inventory, and monitoring. We need to review the land use objectives. And this is very difficult because as soon as you open up that, you bring this into it. And you're going to bring up the conflict. And they're, you talk to some of the industry representatives, well, we don't want to do that because this would just be excuse for environmentalists to, sort of ramp up the game. You talk to the environmentalists and say, yeah, but, if we lose all that caribou habitat, that was hard fought. And so there's suspicion on all sides. So in my mind, the key to addressing these challenges is striving to find a balance between nature and human intervention. It's tended to take sides. Well, in fact, it's not sides. It's not, polarized. Like it's some kind of integrated mechanism sort of around that. And we need to, kind of balance, sort of our focus on sort of historical fidelity of ecosystems to some kind of future ecosystem conditions. But overcoming the barriers to initiate the political will and action that's needed requires a clear understanding of the wildlife values and a strong appreciation of what's at risk. And it's the wildlife in British Columbia that I think is at risk.